Yo, welcome back to another video, and this time I'm going to get this done. It's been way too long since I've dropped my what ifs, so let's get this done this sitting, 5th attempts to charm. Let's just sit back and relax and shoot this shot. The story begins with Izuku Midoriya being told that he is in fact quirkless, and when he hears that, his heart just shatters. It's the same as he was in canon. He's just in the state of desperation. He doesn't know what to do, right? Anyways, so after that, things remain canon up until around the time that we pan to Bakugo taking Izuku's Book of Heroes, exploding it, throwing it at the window, and telling Izuku, jump off the roof and maybe you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, right? So, then Izuku leaves, and as he's leaving, he goes and gets his book, and he's thinking, maybe Bakugo is right. Maybe I should. But then Izuku stops himself. He's like, no, I will become a hero and prove Bakugo wrong. You know, he says Bakugo, not even Kachan this time. He's like, I will prove Bakugo wrong. Anyways, on his way home, he's taking the usual road as in canon. And underneath the bridge, he sees this beautiful looking pendant. It's dirty, but you can still tell how beautiful this pendant is. And while he's inspecting it, you hear from behind him, hey kid, give me your body. And that's when Izuku's like, hey man, that's kinda gay. I don't know why I keep doing that shit. I just find it so funny, I don't know. Anyways, so when that happens, Izuku turns around and gets attacked by the sludge villain, and he's trying to escape. He's gripping at the sludge. He can't breathe, you know. And anyways, after he does that, he starts to fade out. And as he's fading out, you hear, Detroit Smash! Anyways, then Izuku wakes up to All Might just, smacking his face, Izuku wakes up, he's just like, All Might! All Might! All Might! And he's like, oh my god, wait, All Might, can I get your autograph? And he looks in his book and he sees the autograph's already there. And he's like, wow. And he's like, wait, All Might, I have a question for you. All Might's like, yes, young man, what is your question? And Izuku asks, can I be a hero, even though I'm quirkless? All Might replies, no, you cannot. And the amount of distress you could just see in Izuku's eyes, his eyes, all the light in his eyes just basically vanished. They were gone. It was so sad to see. But All Might, the way he thought about it was, I'd rather that than him, try and do it and then get completely destroyed in the world of Hero. And that was All Might's own version of mercy. However, it wasn't the mercy Izuku currently needed at the time. A depressed and mentally distraught Izuku is walking home, and that's when he realizes he still has his pendant. And All Might had given it back to him. And he's like, wow, at least I have this thing. It's the one good thing to come out of today. And when he's looking at the back of it, he like swishes off some dirt. He notices it has some sort of sigil on the back, some sort of spell. And he's just like, what the hell is this? This has to be a joke. But he wanted to do literally anything to get his mind off of what just happened, because if you looked into this man's eyes right now, there would be zero light. There was nothing left for him almost. And when he does this, he opens his eyes and decides he's at least going to try out the spell, quote unquote, on the back of the pendant. And so he goes to his backyard, he draws the sigil and things, and then he says, with this sacred treasure, I summon thee, divine general, Maho. It was a joke, but he said whatever spell was actually the spell. I don't know if I'll think of one, but we'll see. If I do, I'll let you guys know after. Anyways, so he does it, and then he opens his eyes after a big flash of light, and he sees a tall man. White hair, slightly darker skin, full red drip. He's just like, what the hell? Who are you? Who are you? He's actually kind of frightened, because he's like, what the fuck? Because who would think this sort of sigil thing would actually work, right? And he's just shocked. He's like, what? Huh? Excuse me? And that's when the man looks down on him. He's like, who are you, kid? And he's like, I'm Izuku Midoriya. I don't know, I just did some sort of spell and now you're here? He's like, you performed the ritual. So is there a Holy Grail War? He's like, oh, what? And Archer's like, huh? But when Archer actually sits down for a second and he looks around, he's just like, I sense almost no magic in the world around us. The only bit of magic I sense is in this kid. And there's so much of this magic, it's actual insanity. Then Archer looks at this kid who is frail and weak and looks depressed as hell. And he tells this kid, I will train you in the ways of magic since you have overwhelming magical abilities. It's even higher than me when I first, awakened mine. So, how would you like to learn magic? And Izuku looks at him and is like, I don't even know who you are. And that's when Archer tells him, look at your hand. If you look at your hand, you will see a new tattoo looking thing. Izuku's like, oh my god, I have a tattoo now. Mom's gonna kill me. Ah! And Archer's like, calm down. However, these are what you call command seals. Using these, you can control me. I don't think you should use one as an example right now. However, if you ever see me doing something you would think is evil or something that you'd rather not see me do, and it's an emergency kind of stop, you can command me with one of these and it will completely stop me in my tracks. So you don't really have to worry about me doing anything to you since you're my master technically. Izuku's like, what what do you mean? Didn't I literally just tell you that you can stop me in my tracks? I just explained it. How do you not understand? What do you mean, what do I mean? I just explained it. What kind of question is that? Anyways, after this scenario, Izuku decides, I'm going home. So he heads home, He enters through the door. Inko turns around, sees a big-ass man behind her. Expeditiously faints. She just faints. Izuku, wakes her up. And then she's like, why the fuck is there a grown-ass man with you, Izuku? And then Izuku's like, Mom, I have to tell you about this. I unlocked my quirk. It's some sort of magic quirk. I swear I did. I summoned this guy. I don't think you understand. And she's like, so, are you trying to tell me that this grown man is a part of your quirk, Izuku? And Izuku's like, yeah, he is a part of my quirk. Apparently my quirk has a lot more to it than just summoning him. But apparently he can teach me how to use my magic. And Inko's like, I don't know if I believe him. Now, before I go into more detail here with the, continuation, fixing everything, making it so Inko believes and stuff, I want to explain some things I'm changing from the canonical fate. For one, teleporting your servant to you no longer costs a command seal to have him come to you. It's just an inherent ability that summoners of heroic spirits will have in this timeline. That's the biggest thing, and I'm also scaling down fate power to make it work better with the My Hero universe. So Izuku will not be like no OP motherfucker because he has magic. That's not how it's gonna work. Anyways, let's continue. So Izuku decides to tell Archer to run down the street, and then has Archer teleport back to him after a minute. And Inko's like, I guess, but what if he's doing... Anyways, I'll let it slide for now, but I'd like him to, stay in the guest room, I don't care if he's a part of your quirk, he ain't staying in your room. And Izuku's like, that's fine. Anyways, the next day, Archer and Izuku, they begin their training, and honestly, it's nothing special. It's day in, day out, training to use magic, just meditating, stuff like that, figuring out how it all works. But I do want to say, for the next 6.5 months, Archer teaches Izuku everything Archer knows when it comes to... And, Archer's, flabbergasted. He's honestly how did you learn all this so fast? Your talent is astronomical when it comes to magic. I don't understand how you have done this so quickly. It took me years and years and years to get to my power. And you do it in, 6 months? And Archer's just so confused. But Izuku's like, is that a bad thing? Archer's like, no, no, no. You are actually a fantastic student. But there's nothing left for me to teach you, so I don't know if it'll be possible, but due to this not being the original world I am from, and the magic systems seem to be working slightly different, because I said you've caught up with me, but that's only in this world, because I used to be far more powerful. I'm assuming this world has adjusted my strength for the situation we are currently in. And so Archer then is just like, so with all these changes in the magical system, perhaps you can summon more than one heroic spirit. Izuku's like, alright, let's give it a try then. They head out to the forest and Izuku creates another circle, and Izuku is just like, but I have nothing that actually connects me to Saber. From what you explained, that we need a catalyst. And that's when Archer explains that his and Saber's connection is something special, specifically because the heroic spirit he summoned when he was in the Holy Grail War was Saber. So he in itself is the catalyst. So you can just use him. And Izuku's like, okay, alright, well, let's give it a shot. Using this catalyst, your soul tied to reality, I summon you, heroic spirit Saber. Appear before me! And after Izuku invokes that spell, Saber appears in the summoning circle next to Archer. And Saber looks at Archer and is shocked that he's here. And then looks over at Izuku, and Saber looks at Archer and is like, is there another Holy Grail War? Please tell me there's not. I hoped that was the last one. And Archer's like, no, we're in an entirely different reality, Saber. It's strange. There's an extreme lack of magic. The only magic I have seen is from this young boy. And it's astronomical amounts. He has such an impressive amount of magic. And his talent, it's off the charts. Saber, I met this kid 6 months ago. And he can do everything I can do, almost as well as me. And Saber is shocked to hear this. Saber understands that like their power has been dragged down. She can feel it, but it's mind-boggling to Saber that this is even possible. And then Archer explains to Saber, the reason I had him summon you was I think it would be instrumental to his career as a hero and to his life in general that he learn how to wield a sword. And I couldn't think of any better teacher than the one, the only Saber. Saber's like, alright, quit it with the glazing now. Anyways, they just have a little bit of a yap session. Let us skip to the end of the 10 months. Izuku is a fantastic swordsman. He's fantastic with magic. He's great at the creation magic that Archer taught him. Like, it is now, like, Izuku's specialty. Archer wishes he was Izuku type. Not actually, but Izuku is amazing with all these things. His physical strength is above, like, you know, strong bodybuilders. But, like, it's below somebody with a strength quirk. His speed is above, like, it's almost on par with Ida's. Because the magic going through his system, it strengthens him, but doesn't make him OP. That's why I drag the power scaling down. Also, when Izuku's going in to take this test, he has a newfound confidence. He knows he's the shit, alright? Because during that 10 months, he was very self-deprecating, yes. However, Archer did not let that slide. Because Archer explained to Izuku, he's disrespecting 4 people, and like, outside of that, a whole group of people. He's disrespecting his mother, who believes in him. He's disrespecting Archer, who taught him. He's disrespecting Saber, who taught him. He's disrespecting himself, who worked so hard for all this. And other than that, he's also extraordinarily disrespecting those whom are weaker. And Izuku, hearing that he was disrespecting people who are weaker than himself, the guilt he felt was really high. Like, he felt so guilty about it. And so Izuku decided from that day on, he would view himself how he should have some confidence. He should have some backbone, because he has that strength, right? So anyways, he's headed for the entrance exams. He does the written part. The entire conversation where Ida's like, shut up, happens, but Izuku just ignores Ida. It means nothing to Izuku what Ida says. Even the teacher ends up shutting Ida down. It's just like, Ida, you are the person who is interrupting. So I'm gonna need you to quiet down and to listen because I wasn't done speaking. Anyways, then they go into the practical portion. We don't really need to cover it until the end. But before we do that, I do want to explain. Izuku destroyed 70 robots. 50% of those robots were 2-pointers, 30% were 1-pointers, and 20% were 3-pointers. So he ends up with a whole total of 133 robots. He figures that is plenty of points to get him into UA. So he starts to walk back towards the entrance. That's when you hear the rumbling. He turns around and he sees the founding titan, Eren Yeager, behind him. But on a real note, he sees the 0-pointer behind him. And he's going to continue walking, but that's when he notices this girl, Uraraka, underneath the rubble. And he had a nice interaction with her earlier. They just passed, said hi, it was polite, but it was nice. And so he runs over as fast as he can. He picks up the rubble, pushes it off her, picks her up, and he just bolts it. He's gone. He runs as fast as he possibly can away from the 0-pointer, all the way back to the entrance. Alright? And since he saw the 0-pointer, he decided, I'm gonna do it. He drops off the girl. It's just like, stay here, you'll be safe. Runs back. He creates 50 swords, alright, with his new magical ability. And he propels all of them at the 0-pointer. And it's moving at such speeds. It physically pushes it back. And it destroys the circuitry in the 0-pointer's head. It was awesome. And the teachers were just, they were bamboozled. They were so impressed. And then they read his file and it says, Izuku Midoriya, quirkless. That's when Principal Nezu decides he wants to speak to this Izuku Midoriya, have a conversation with him, understand his powers. And when Nezu says this, All Might's like, I also wish to join you. So they meet in the principal's office, all three of them, and Izuku is just like, oh, it's All Might. And All Might is like, young man, you did very well today. Izuku is like, you think so? Because Izuku, he's pressed about this situation because All Might was the one who told him he couldn't be a hero. And that's when All Might is like, I'm sorry for what I said to you those 10 months ago. Clearly, I was wrong. You have the fine makings of a true hero. Izuku Midoriya. And so Izuku explains everything about his abilities, everything you basically learned up until this 18-minute mark, and he decides to prove that he can do this by teleporting Saber into the room via his magical servant master connection thing. He summons Saber, and so they decide to have a full in-depth conversation. And in the end, they do decide to enroll Saber as a student because she is technically a part of his quirk. Anyways, let's time skip to the first day of school. It's the usual canon stuff, Ida, Bakugo argument. Bakugo looks at Deku this time, but just sneers and ignores Deku. Deku, who respects himself now though, just completely ignores the fact that Bakugo sneered, sits down. That is when Uraraka walks into the room and sees Izuku. She runs up to him and she's like, thank you so much for helping me. I appreciate it. And Saber comes in right after. And that's when Aizawa, you just see Caterpillar in a sleeping bag head as stand up. And you're just like, alright, we're all going outside. Put on your gym uniforms. We're going to be doing an exam. And so once they all make it outside, Aizawa throws the ball to Izuku. It's just like, throw this as far as you can using your quirk. Izuku manages to throw it a whole 350 meters. And that's just due to his physical strength not being something properly insane. It's still more than a bodybuilder would get, trust. And so Izuku, points that out, blah, blah, blah. Then Bakugo goes and he gets his 780, and that's when Bakugo looks at Izuku is like, yeah, I'm better than you. And everyone's like, wow, this looks so fun. Aizawa's like, fun, huh? Last place gets expelled. Izuku gets first place because he was second place in about everything. Yeah, he was only third place in the ball throw, but being second place in everything when everybody else is fluctuating leaves Deku in first place total. However, at the end, Mineta is the one who ends up getting expelled. The reason I'm confirming expulsion is because I want to have the canonical amount of classmates, and with Saber being added to the roster, somebody had to go. Personally, I don't like EDP 445 midget boy over there, so he's the one who's gone. I don't know why I'm talking like this, but I'ma stop. Okay, I'm done now. Anyways, so after this, things continue pretty similarly, and we'll just move on to the next day, and that's Heroes vs. Villains training exercise. Izuku and Uraraka are teamed up this time against Bakugo and Tenya Ida. However, Bakugo and Izuku are very similar in strength, and I don't mean the same way they were in canon where Izuku was able to just punch up and do everything. No, they are going to be going blow for blow, hand for hand, kick for kick. They will be on par with each other. It is crazy work because Izuku can't exactly pull out his strongest thing because they're blades. He doesn't actually want to hurt Bakugo. However, when Bakugo unleashes that big-ass explosion, Izuku decides to make a wall of swords. He creates so many swords, it creates a wall. And it doesn't even budge. It completely tanks that hit. And Bakugo's like, what? How'd you block that, you dumb Deku? I cringe whenever I do that, I'll be honest. Uraraka is up top, and Izuku and Bakugo, they're still going at it. In the end, due to Bakugo relying on explosions, Izuku does actually fall. Unfortunately. Because I'm not making him super OP, and he didn't have as useful access to his weapons as he would have liked. Because he really did not want to hurt Bakugo. Anyways. I say anyways a lot. I am so sorry. Let us continue. Uraraka gets captured, and that was the end, and it's villains win. However, after that fight, Bakugo might have won, but he genuinely has a newfound respect for Izuku. And after that, he honestly, kind of calms down with the insults. He still calls Izuku Deku, but he doesn't do it in an as derogatory tone. He genuinely is starting to view Izuku towards his level, Though Bakugo's jealousy was never really about strength, as we learned. And so All Might asks, who was the MVP of that match? And Momo answers that it was actually Izuku. Because he understood that Bakugo was going to immediately come for him. And so he sent Uraraka on ahead. And he stayed back and tried to hold Bakugo off so Uraraka could get the bomb. Bakugo, even though it did work out, should not have attacked so flamboyantly, I guess. It was so forward, and it could have ended terribly for the villains. And so I wouldn't say it's Bakugo, especially since he didn't actually work with his teammate. Ida embodied the personality, but none of the anything else. And Uraraka, love her to death, accomplished nothing. Did a whole lot of nothing. So it was Izuku who was the MVP. And so they all just ended off there, Izuku gets his permission slip, he brings it home, and go signs, blah blah blah. Then they head for the USJ. Alright. The USJ goes crazy, I tells ya. Crazy. Because when they pull up, they're talking, 13 goes on the boring ass speech, and that's when they see it. A bunch of villains appearing. And we all know that is not a good thing. And Kirishima's like, wow, you also got us fake villains? And Aizawa's like, those aren't fake villains. Everybody stay back. But before Aizawa can actually react this time, Kurogiri teleported everybody everywhere, including Aizawa, and only left the students for the villains. So, like, Aizawa was in, like, the ice area, 13 was in the water area, but, like, Izuku, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki, they were just left at the entrance to fight all the villains who were coming for them. However, towards the end there, Izuku is just like, alright, Bakugo, I'm gonna be honest, with your explosions and your momentum that you gain, you do end up being faster than me. So I think you'll be the best option to go get the teachers. So please go, Bakugo. And Bakugo's like, you think I'm gonna listen to you, you damn nerd? And Bakugo does think about it though. It's just like, this isn't really a time for this kind of situation to be making fun of Izuku. This is a dangerous situation that's very life or death. And Bakugo, as twatish as he is, he understands some situations you have to do certain things. I mean, he isn't stupid. Anyways, so Bakugo goes, Izuku, Kirishima, and Todoroki are all that's left to fight off against all those villains. Thankfully, Todoroki is as strong as he is, and there's a lot of, just freezing everybody. And Izuku and Kirishima are fighting the Kurogiri. They end up pinning him down, and that's when Shigaraki is like, Nomu, kill them. And Izuku is just like, that is not good. And he sees the Nomu running at Todoroki, and that's when Izuku creates his wall of swords that just get destroyed. Like, they don't actually get, like, shattered, but, like, the wall breaks itself. All the swords, like, go flying across places. And Izuku's like, damn it, I managed to, soften the blow. But Todoroki still got hurt by that. And so Izuku decides he's going to have to fight this Nomu. He starts throwing daggers that he's creating as he's throwing them. He keeps creating and throwing them, luring the Nomu away from them. But now it's just him and the Nomu that he's going to have to 1v1. And I don't know if you realize, he doesn't really have a chance. This Nomu, he's so fast, he basically just appears in front of Izuku and punches him. But Izuku just barely managed to get his arms in the way. But his arms, they're still fractured up the wazoo due to his magic defending them a bit. And then he ends up, pulling out a bow. He's like, if I'm going to beat this guy, this is my only opportunity. He creates a bow and an arrow. And he draws it back as Nomu pulls up. He blocks another hit. But as he blocks it and his arms break, he shoots the arrow. And the arrow is following him, basically. So he hits the wall, lands on the ground. And his arms, they're completely broken. They're not gonna, do too hot. And so the Nomu's about to punch Izuku again, finish him off. However, Aizawa cancels the Nomu's quirk to just completely offset regeneration. And the arrow that was imbued with magic hits the Nomu in the head, just completely destroying it, killing the Nomu on the spot. And Shigaraki's, Nomu, how could you lose to a brat? And Shigaraki's tweaking out, and Kurogiri understands the situation, so he takes Shigaraki and he just gets out of there because Kirishima couldn't keep him. All the heroes make it back over, but everything is basically over by the time they get there, unfortunately. They just round up all the stragglers. But they look at Izuku. Like, Kirishima's just knocked out, but Izuku, his arms are broken. His leg is, like, fractured in 3 different places. The other leg, not looking too hot. He has, like, a severe concussion. Like, Izuku is physically cooked after that fight. And so they're like, damn, how's he gonna deal with all that? But they bring Izuku back to Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl heals him best as she can. However, it will still take a while for Izuku to be 100%. And so, when the sports festival begins, Izuku is still only at like 70%. So like, he's ahead of Ida, but that's only because, you know, he's smarter when it comes to the actual obstacle course. And towards the end, you know, he's in a situation where he's thinking that he's just going to lose, like regular Izuku did. And so he did this exact same thing as regular Izuku in this timeline. So he continues on, and the cavalry battle that nobody cares about, it goes about the same as it did canonically. And then we go to the Huen v. Huens. I want to emphasize that Izuku is not full power. He's tired. He's broken. And so he loses first round to Shinso. And then we don't care about the rest of the fight, so unfortunately the USJ does end quite quickly. After the end of the USJ, Izuku is called into the office to speak with All Might. All Might and Izuku, they start to talk, and All Might says, Izuku, I would like you to take my quirk and become the next symbol of peace. Izuku's like, what? What do you mean take your quirk? And then All Might explains everything about One for All, and then he even explains about All for One, so Izuku knows what he's getting into. And Izuku's like, yeah, I'd accept your quirk. And All Might explains the reason it took him so long to find a proper, successor. One, he was going to go with Mirio, but he wanted to double check on Izuku, because Izuku did seem like he would be a fantastic successor. And two, if Izuku had One for All, Izuku's power, he'd almost be unstoppable physically. No quirk could probably defeat him. I don't even think All for One could. And so, All Might decided to give Izuku One for All. And All Might also said, since I decided to give you One for All, I also want you to train with my old teacher. Izuku's like, alright, I don't think I'm going to get much since I got knocked out the first round anyway. All Might's like, yeah, that was unfortunate. You weren't 100% though. Take pride in that. And Izuku's like, yeah, I did try even though I wasn't 100%. And Izuku decides to go to his internship with Gran Torino. And things kind of just remain similar to canonical. However, he adapts a lot faster to One for All, and he can use 20% right off the bat due to the magic fortifying his muscles, his bones, every part of his body. So he can use a lot more of One for All than he normally would be able to. Izuku is already incredibly powerful with the bonus. And surprisingly, One for All actually buffed Izuku's magic, which was a really nice surprise for Izuku due to him feeling like his magic just wasn't strong enough. Like, it was cool quirk and had a lot of uses, but it just didn't have the required power to actually defeat a lot of people. And Izuku understood that, so with One for All, Izuku has become way, way, way more powerful. So when he catches up and fights Stain, he doesn't even need to wait for Todoroki. He ends up destroying Stain in the fight. And Ida gets mad at Izuku, and Izuku sits down and he tells Ida. And he says it very rudely too, because he doesn't care right now. He says, Ida, you almost got yourself killed. And you have the audacity. After almost getting yourself killed, and due to you not going to get help and deciding to fight him on yourself, you almost got a pro hero killed. Had the audacity to complain that I fought somebody instead of letting two people die. I'm trying to protect people while you're trying to get everybody hurt. So, unless you want to quit being a hero, I suggest you shut the fuck up. And he's very rude about it, and he does go off on Ida for like a whole 5-minute tangent until Native's blood thing actually wears off, and Native calms Izuku down. And Ida is actually thinking now. He's genuinely thinking about what he has done at this point. How he genuinely put somebody else in danger just because he wanted to get his revenge for his elder brother. He does realize that what he was doing just wasn't heroic in any sense of the word. And so Ida decides that he's going to stay in the hero course. However, this time around, he's going to do everything the best he can. He will never make this kind of mistake ever again. And that brings us to the end of the Hosu incident. And after that thought process from Ida, things just remain canonical up until the exams. The teams remain the same for these teachers versus students exams. It'll be Izuku and Bakugo versus All Might. However, throughout this time, as much as Bakugo clowns on Izuku, Bakugo does understand just how strong Izuku is now, and his ego isn't quite in the way. That first thing where they heroes versus villains gave Bakugo a newfound respect for Izuku, because they were so genuinely on par with each other that Bakugo had nothing else to say but that he was kind of impressed. The quirkless Izuku put up a good fight. And he was shocked that Izuku ended up with some sort of quirk. But unlike in canon, Bakugo's tweak out over it, Bakugo actually just asks Izuku. And Izuku does explain it to Bakugo. Not one for all because he didn't have it at the time, but he explained that his quirk is magic. And he just didn't know that it was magic because the doctor said he didn't have a quirk. He didn't feel anything special until just, one day. Blah, blah, blah. And Bakugo kind of understood the fact that it was impossible for Izuku to really know about his quirk. And he just moved on from it. But they still have some sort of rivalry where Bakugo will still give Izuku crazy amounts of attitude. But they do work together. The battle begins with Izuku running straight through the gate after their plan. And Bakugo, he hangs back. He's kind of hidden. He's not going too forward. He's staying hidden so he can catch All Might off guard. Izuku just decides to say, screw it. I'm going to go straight for All Might. And that's what he does. Izuku heads straight forward, just at All Might. Just straight ahead. And All Might comes to punch Izuku, but Izuku is able to create a wall of swords so quickly that it completely absorbs the punch from All Might, and giving Izuku a chance to punch him towards one of the buildings, which Bakugo was inside of. And after Izuku punches All Might towards that building, you see a giant explosion engulf All Might. Unfortunately, it didn't do that much. All Might just goes after Bakugo, puts him in the 1-2 wombo combo. And Izuku is like, alright, well, if that's not dealing enough damage, we realistically can't deal enough damage, so we're going to have to switch the plan. We are going to have to escape. And so Izuku and Bakugo decide that Izuku's going to, trap All Might in a ball of swords, basically, trying to keep him away for as long as possible, whilst they both just dip. They run. However, All Might breaks out extremely quickly. All Might just punches and he's just out. It wasn't any sort of issue for All Might to escape this ball of swords. And so Izuku tells Bakugo to keep running. He'll hold back All Might, but Bakugo, he ain't gonna let that slide. Bakugo also turns around and they just start putting in the work, but nothing they do deals the required damage. And Bakugo gets punched one time and bro's just out cold. And so Izuku actually grabs Bakugo and he just beelines it straight for the exit. He's doing everything in his power. He's throwing all kinds of spells that he can accomplish. He even pulls out his bow, shoots a few arrows towards All Might. And Izuku, he's about to get out of the exit when All Might grabs him. However, Izuku throws Bakugo out the exit, and completely cuts his shirt off using a sword and falls through the exit, therefore escaping from the one, the only symbol of peace. Alright. So they won this exam, and it was a very hard-fought victory for them. The entire class is just dumbfounded from what they were witnessing, because they thought, like, Bakugo and Izuku were both incredibly strong, but All Might was no-diffing them. But the fact of the matter is, Izuku is, not as strong as All Might, but if he just focuses on using magic, All Might will just beat Izuku. The only reason Izuku was able to do all he was able to do is due to the fact he had One for All, though it can only go up to like 30% at this point. The rest of the fights remain canonical throughout the entire thing, and then they go for the forest training camp, alright? And little spoiler ahead, this shit goes crazy. Anyways, they get there, and Izuku does the exact same training he did originally because he's already extremely proficient with his magic, to the point where the heroic spirits don't even think there's anything left to teach him magic-wise. So, Izuku focuses on learning how to use One for All properly. Anyways, things remain canonical up until the villains attack. Izuku, he goes and he saves Koda using magic and One for All. And he's learned how to combine the two fighting styles so fluently that it honestly wasn't much of a problem for him. And after this muscular fight, he goes and starts trying to help all of Class 1A. However, what happens next is heartbreaking. He's saving everybody. He finds Tokiyami. He lures him over to Bakugo and Todoroki to fight Moonfish, and then they light it up, stopping Tokiyami, fixing all that. However, All for One appears before them. And he doesn't appear alone. He appears with the entire League of Villains. And as he appears, you will see him holding an Inko Midoriya in his hand. And Izuku, seeing this, is genuinely distraught. He doesn't know what to do. And so, to break the next symbol of peace before he ever could become it, All for One snaps Inko Midoriya's neck right in front of Izuku. And Izuku, being completely, distraught, and his mind just kind of stops working. But in all this chaos where everyone's just dumbfounded, they manage to take Bakugo and Tokiyami with them. And now, all the heroes that were there and the rest of the students are all honestly mind-boggled. And they understand why Izuku is like this, and they also understand that it is not a good thing, especially when All Might finds out about it. Because Izuku is in a near comatose state due to the trauma he has now. And it is a situation where even the classmates and teachers who saw it honestly are not doing that well mentally, because seeing your student's mother held by the neck in front of him and her neck just gets snapped, even the teachers don't even know how to feel about such a situation. And honestly, Izuku remains basically in a comatose state until the war kind of begins. They're taking in refugees and everything, basically all into UA. But during this period of time, Izuku actually ends up sneaking out. And this Izuku, he's not like the vigilante Izuku that was in canon. No. This Izuku, every villain he comes across, he kills. He kills every single villain he finds. His moral compass is out of whack. It's nigh just gone. The only villain he lets survive is Lady Nagant, truthfully. Because the only villainous thing she was doing was attacking Izuku. However, the rest who were attacking civilians and stuff, nah, they're all dead. Izuku was killing them one by one. And honestly, the heroes had no idea that it was Izuku killing them. They genuinely just believed Izuku had just run away because he just couldn't deal with the stress anymore. However, his classmates understood something different, especially Ida. Ida understands that Izuku is feeling probably worse than he was feeling when he pulled up on Stain. He understands that most likely these deaths of villains are Izuku's doing. And he ends up telling, like Bakugo and Todoroki and stuff about it. And he doesn't tell the entire class because some of them would not react well to this. So, 7 of them, the ones that are trustworthy, group up and also sneak out to go after Izuku. Because that's the only thing they know how to do. And Izuku doesn't have access to any quirks due to being nigh comatose for so long. And he's suddenly unleashing a random power against Lady Nagant when his black whips start coming out of his body uncontrollably. And he almost does kill Lady Nagant due to it. However, this gives his class his location. All the 7 people who are pulling up, it was like Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, Ida, Uraraka, Momo, and Saber. Obviously, since Saber is one of his classmates. All 7 of them go after Izuku. However, the only reason they're about to pull this off is purely due to Saber being stronger than Izuku. Izuku, he's about to fight them to just run away. However, none of them wanted to allow that. So, they do a very similar strat to Canon. However, once Izuku slows down a little bit, that's when Saber gets in his way. And Izuku, he isn't thinking straight, so he doesn't use his command seals on Saber. So Saber is not even remotely affected. Izuku then starts trying to fight Saber, but he's basically lost his reason. So his sword play is out of whack, so he's not even doing nothing to Saber. And Saber honestly no-diffs Izuku. That's just how bad his mental state was. Sure, people with powers who would attack Izuku would lose, but most of those people are without technique. For example, Stain might have actually beat Izuku in the current situation. And so, Izuku, just being completely dumbfounded and knocked out by Saber, returns to UA. However, one thing that nobody does is tell the teachers that it was Izuku killing, because that would ruin Izuku's hero career. And so Izuku Midoriya then, returns to the camp, and he's still, in a state of shock, even months after the entire scenario where his mother was killed. And that's gonna be how it is until towards the end. Izuku's training and stuff, but Saber and everybody are trying to talk to Izuku. However, for some reason, Ida did not. But towards the end of this time of Izuku's depression, basically, Ida decides to actually have a full-on heart-to-heart with Izuku, explaining that he understands well enough how Izuku feels. It wasn't the exact same situation, since his brother is alive, and he didn't follow through with anything. But he understands the place that Izuku's mind has gone. And they end up having this full-blown heart-to-heart. And Ida ends up reminding Izuku what Izuku himself told Ida during the Hosu incident. And Izuku, he's still not okay, but his mind is, starting to wrap around the entire situation, He's begun to accept the fact that his mother is just gone. She's dead, and there's nothing he can do about it. And so, Izuku, knowing this fact, is still, distraught. However, he's in a point where it's rage that he's using to fuel his strength. But he isn't, losing himself in said rage. So, say another couple weeks pass, and that's when the war truly begins. The heroes versus the villains. And honestly, Izuku has just had enough of it. You randomly see him walking towards the center of the battlefield. And that is when you see him form the sigil, the sigil to summon a heroic spirit. And everybody's honestly kind of stops fighting to just watch what this man is doing. Izuku forms this entire sigil, and he still has this piece of hair, golden hair, that Archer had given to him when he originally summoned Saber. And he's like, you might need this one day. And currently, in the current situation, Archer and Saber don't know what's going on because they were in the back defending the civilians and stuff, because that's what they knew Izuku would have wanted them doing. Because that's the kind of person Izuku is. But Izuku is standing in the middle of this battlefield, drawing this big sigil, and in the middle of it, he lays the golden hair. And the next thing you hear is, I summon the King of Heroes, Gilgamesh. And you just see a giant bright yellow light appear. And Gilgamesh looks at him, and Gilgamesh understands immediately what kind of person he is. A king understands their subjects. And to Gilgamesh, that's exactly what Izuku is. He's a little Padawan to Gilgamesh. And so Gilgamesh is like, I see. And without Izuku saying anything, Gilgamesh, honestly, just wipes half the battlefield. And that, after doing that, so Gilgamesh, he just used his, all of his gates summoning swords, cutting a lot of, tendons, stuff like that, so villains can't actually fight anymore. And after doing all of that, Gilgamesh returns towards the back, and Izuku alone starts walking down just the field of villains. And for some reason, all the villains who look at him just are avoiding him, because there's some vibe he's giving off that genuinely confuses them. And Gilgamesh asks Izuku before he makes it all the way through, do you plan on killing them? And Izuku is honest about it, and it's just like, I don't know. Because he knows his mother would never have wanted him to start killing. And he's already begun to make that mistake. However, should he finish this in her honor like that? Because he honestly doesn't believe his mother would have wanted him killing All For One. But Izuku is just like, but she's not here to tell me not to. So he's in a state of turmoil, deciding whether he should kill All For One or not. However, that is when the actual League of Villains, who hadn't actually picked any fights yet, pull up on Izuku. All of them. And Shigaraki, he's on his crackhead mode too. So Shigaraki, the entire League of Villains, All For One, they're all standing before Izuku, and All For One is like, have you come to surrender? Or have you come to get your revenge? Izuku is just like, honestly, I don't know quite yet. But All For One doesn't really care, so then they start attacking Izuku. But Izuku has had enough of it. And then you hear him say, I am the bone of my sword. Steel is my body and fire my blood. I have created over 1,000 blades, unknown to death, nor known to life. Have withstood pain to create many weapons, yet those hands will never hold anything. So as I pray, unlimited blade works! And what will appear before them is this entire landscape. It's not the same as, Archers or Emiya's in actual Fate, no. It is the city, Hosu City specifically, full of swords down every street, up every building. And when they look, they are genuinely horrified to see what is before him. Izuku then immediately takes most of the League of Villains out of the fight except Shigaraki and All For One. He doesn't even attack them. He stabs most of them through the shoulders and legs and stuff, just completely incapacitating them, but not killing them. However, when he's done this, he looks at both Shigaraki and All For One, and he says to All For One specifically, "I'm not gonna kill you, but you're gonna wish I had." And then he looks at Shigaraki, is like, "I understand that you're just a confused guy who's made all the wrong decisions because you were raised by the worst possible person. However, I don't care." And he just immediately cuts Shigaraki's head off. He does not care enough to hear anything Shigaraki has to say. Shigaraki is immediately decapitated in front of All For One. And this enrages All For One, because All For One wanted Shigaraki as his vessel, right? So All For One starts buffing up his body with 100 different quirks, He goes to punch Izuku, who just moves his head and just dodges the punch, The shockwave does nothing to the reality marble. And Izuku's looking at All For One, he's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna love this. You're gonna wish you had never done that to my mother, because it's game over for you now." And Izuku proceeds to take 1,000, well, not quite 1,000, like 100 blades, and he starts cutting every single part of All For One, So little cuts all over his body, and then his tendons, he just completely slices every single tendon. And as he's doing this, he's using his magic to, heal All For One enough to where he doesn't bleed out, but he continues to feel the pain. Then he starts to cut off parts of All For One's body. He starts with the left foot, moves to the right foot, and then he looks at All For One's face, the just skin, and he's like, "You're missing eyes, nose, and a mouth. I wonder how I can fix that." And then he slowly starts carving the mouth shape open, and then he stabs 2 holes where the nose should be, and then he carves open the eye place. And All For One this entire time is screaming as blood is leaving his face. And Izuku, honestly, has a giant smile on his face. Most people would believe that his mind is just gone. However, Izuku begins to realize what he's been doing. He realizes that what he is doing is the worst way to go about this. His mother would be so disappointed in him. And so he does all he can to heal All For One without, putting him back in a good shape. And even so, he still wants his revenge. And he stabs All For One through the heart, killing All For One on the spot, because he realized torture was even worse than his original plan of just killing him. So he killed Shigaraki, he might as well kill All For One. However, the reality marble is still up, and he doesn't actually do anything to the rest of the League of Villains, especially Toga specifically. Toga don't deserve that Fade Ran. I love Toga. That's the main reason why I want to get away with it. And after that, he lets go of the reality marble after running away. And that's when everybody comes to see the carnage. Holes in people, a decapitated Shigaraki, All For One with scars all over his face where Izuku began to cut him open, missing feet, all his tendons severed. And everybody who knows Izuku realized that Izuku went too far this time. However, they also understand why he did it. So, we're going to time skip to the repercussions. They understand that Izuku was not sane in the moment, So they decide that if Izuku wants to continue going down the hero route, during this entire next 3 years of schooling he has to get, he must go to therapy every single day. And UA will pay for it, since he did stop the entire war arc on his own. along with like his servants technically, but they're part of his ability. And so he goes through therapy for the next 3 years. Eventually, he comes to terms with everything he's done, and he regrets what he had done to All For One and Shigaraki. However, to him, he also understands, in the moment, truthfully, he didn't have much of an option. And that will be the end of this What If, you sexy people. I love you guys, and anybody who does actually watch this, I appreciate you 1000%. I'm going to be posting What Ifs more frequently from now on, so make sure to tune into any of those you see me doing. And love you all. See you all next time. Peace.